Do you want to use other mic? Yeah.
What is this? Huh? This is a mic? Because, okay, I will be mainly sitting here, but sometimes. Okay, so it is time to start the lecture. Now you can see it's a three lecture. This is the third of the lecture in the series. There are two more coming. They are integrated, not integrated, they are related to each other. You will find a lot of repetition in all these lectures. But that's good for you to put the things in context. So, for instance, this is my last lecture in your semester in the blog. What is the antagonist? We will discussing same thing, revisit the distribution of cholinergic receptor that we did last time, and classify the cholinergic antagonists based on the mechanism of action. Discuss the mechanism of action, clinical uses, major adverse effects, and contraindications of anti-muscarinic drugs. We'll discuss the classification of neuromuscular blocking agents on the basis of their mechanism of action. And finally, mechanism of action, clinical uses, and major adverse effects of various neuromuscular blocking agents. On the first page, there seems a lot of learning objectives 3, 4, 5. But overall, it's very concise lecture. Not many trucks in this class. Same thing. I think now you know, remember all these people immediately. Any question? Everything is clear to you? Okay. So now see, now the title of today's lecture is cholinergic antagonist. So wherever there is acetylcholine, we would like to antagonize that part. So wherever there is acetylcholine, preganglionic part, okay, of both sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia, both ganglionic parasympathetic part, and then neuromuscular junction. There is acetylcholine. So to summarize, these are the places where you would like to antagonize and then call the drug as anticholinergic or cholinergic antagonist. You know, right? So here, nicotinic receptors, preganglionic, postganglionic muscarinic receptors, and nicotinic receptor and the neuromuscular junction. So these are the targets of today's drug. This one, and this one. So based on the identification of these targets, we will classify the drugs accordingly. There will be anti-muscarinic drugs, post-ganglionic parasympathetic receptor organ, anti-nicotinic at two places, ganglion and neuromuscular junction. So in that case, they are again divided into ganglion blockers and neuromuscular blockers. Pretty easy. I made your life easier. Let's go one by one. So three classes: anti-muscarinic, ganglion blocker, neuromuscular blocker. Anti-muscarinic representative drugs atropine, scopolamine, and few other we will discuss in the subsequent slide. Just keep in mind. Mechanism of action, they are there. If I ask you to describe the mechanism of action based on this figure, how do you describe? Yes, please. Can you describe what is the mechanism of action of this? But in what manner, in what fashion? It's a competitive. It's a anti-muscarinic agents are the competitive antagonists of acetylcholine in muscarinic receptor. So, if they are competing with acetylcholine and they are disconnecting neurotransmitter from the muscarinic receptor. Okay. The distribution of muscarinic receptors is broad, so effects of anti-muscarinic drugs are diffuse, just like we mentioned in the case of acetylcholine or others in my last lecture. Now, I don't want to confuse you with just an academic discussion. Just to keep in your mind. We say anti-muscarinic drugs are reversible, competitive antagonists of acetylcholine in muscarinic receptor. That's okay. But an additional information is, the recent evidence suggests that muscarinic receptors at many sites are constitutively active. Therefore, most anti-muscarinic drugs should be technically considered as inverse agonists. Now, let me test your memory. Do you remember the difference between an inverse agonist and an antagonist? Not interesting. Opposite direction. Okay. In their case, inverse agonists become inverse agonists in a place when the receptors are constitutively active even in the absence of a ligand. Did you get my point? So in that case, if an antagonist binds with that receptor which is constitutive. So do you know the definition of constitutive? It works all without any activation. Just like in the case of we discussed Oxford and Constitution. Oxford is constitutive and Constitution is indivisible. Here in the case, some receptors, histamine and some muscarinic are constitutively active. They do not require acetylcholine to bind and activate them. So in that case, if a drug binds with those constitutively active receptors, it turns off and with the effect opposite to the acetylcholine. So technically, we will call them as inverse agonists. But follow in the books, you will find the competitive receptor antagonist. You call it antagonist. Just I wanted to stimulate your knowledge. Yes. Physiological antagonism is separate thing. You see, we discussed this in our first lecture. Antagonism can be of various types. Pharmacological antagonism, chemical antagonism, and physiological antagonism. Pharmacological means there is a competition in the same receptor. Okay? Physiological is when there is no competition between two drugs in the same receptor type, but they produce an action which is opposite. Both are agonists. In physiological antagonism, both are agonists. For example, acetylcholine and norepinephrine, it must have just a beta receptors in the heart. Norepinephrine, epinephrine working to beta receptors. What will be the effect? What is the effect of epinephrine on the heart? Yes, heart. And what is the effect of acetylcholine acting through into receptors on the heart? So, nothing wrong. Lagging to the antagonist, both are agonists.
I still don't get the difference of the inverse
Inverse agonist binds with the same receptor. Same receptor, they are individual ligands. But produces an effect which is the opposite. So you won't understand the difference between an agonist and an inverse agonist unless you know by heart the definition of antagonist. What is the definition of antagonist? No action. Whereas in the case of inverse agonist, it produces action. It is on the difference in the same receptor. There is never opposite. Okay. So let's move anti-muscarinic drug. Now, Sam, just move in the different direction. Like just yesterday, we discussed about acetylcholine, opposite direction, antagonist. In the CNS, sedation, anti-emetic, anti-Parkinsonism, amnesia. You are not aware of these effects. You will learn later on the role of acetylcholine in causing vomiting. Role of muscarinic receptors in causing vomiting, especially in the vestibular. Have you ever experienced? Some of you might have definitely. Motion sickness. Motion sickness, the drug of choice for motion sickness is an anti-muscarinic. Because vomiting is an act caused by the diverse stimuli. If you eat something, so if you overeat, you feel vomiting. If you go in the ship on the plane, you feel vomiting. That is motion sickness. If you have some toxic substance, you have injected some bacteria or toxins, you will feel vomiting. So much so that you have severe pain in that toxin, you will feel vomiting. So much so, even the thought of the previous event, foul smell, foul odor, is able. So these diverse stimuli cause vomiting due to stimulation of various receptors in the periphery and within the brain. One of them is activation of muscarinic receptors in the brain, which part of the brain, which is associated with your equilibrium, vestibular, where the head skills and the brains. You see, these are spiritual things. When your body is in this equilibrium, you lose the sense of being, where are you? Position and space, you lose the balance. You are not aware, just like in ship or in merry-go-round. You lose your vestibular apparatus is totally confused. Okay? In that case, muscular receptors are activated and they cause vomiting, and the treatment of that type of vomiting is different from the vomiting that is caused by infections or toxins. You will learn later on. Okay? Just to give you an idea that muscular receptors are responsible for some types of vomiting. That is why it causes anti-emetic effect and also anti-Parkinsonism. Once again, this is premature concept, but to tell you briefly that have you heard about substantia nigra? The substantia nigra in the basal ganglia, which are responsible for motor coordination of the skeletal muscles. Have you heard about Parkinson's disease? So Parkinson's disease is basically the destruction, selective destruction of the dopaminergic neurons in the basal ganglia. And in order to balance out dopamine, there is acetylcholine. So there is a balance, fine balance between cholinergic neurotransmission and dopaminergic neurotransmission. So there are two strategies to treat Parkinson's disease. On the one way, you decrease the concentration of acetylcholine and you increase the concentration of dopamine. So that is why anti-muscarinic drugs are given to treat Parkinson's disease. And the reverse is true for, last time we discussed about one class of drugs used cholinergic agonist in Alzheimer's disease. So in Alzheimer's, there is a selective destruction of cholinergic neurons. In Parkinson's, there is a selective destruction of dopaminergic neurons. You know the effects of acetylcholine on eye. So empty muscle will cause sacroplegia, paralysis of the ciliary muscle, mydriasis. Do you know mydriasis? Dilatation of the pupil, raise in intraocular pressure. Previously, last lecture, decrease in intraocular pressure. Now they are increasing intraocular pressure. Bronchi, dilation, bronchodilation. GIT, smooth muscle, paralysis. There will be relaxation. You won't call paralysis, you call relaxation. It is not paralysis. Relaxation of the smooth muscle throughout paralysis because contraction is inhibited. NC receptor. Genetic urinary tract, relaxation of bladder wall, urinary retention, and decreased tone of ureter. Everything is retained because of the relaxation of the bladder smooth muscle. And then heart, tachycardia, due to blockade of M2 receptors, very good. So everything opposite to acetylcholine. Glands, decreased secretion, all secretions will be decreased, bronchial, salivary, fluid, everything will be decreased. Okay. And body temperature will increase because of the increased thermostat and decreased sweating. Sweating is the major mechanism of decreasing the body temperature. When sweating is lost, the body temperature will. So, now based on these pharmacological relations, just conceptualize. Can you think of some diseases or conditions where these antimuscular drugs may help?
Right now.
Right now?
Sorry, I like it too much saliva. Sorry, too much saliva.
Is there a condition which is the
Hyperhidrosis.
very good.
Regular cardiac. Or is there arrhythmia?
Just for single role, then there's the use of an people are when they're bradycardia, you give them. Arginine violin, very good. We discussed last time. We discussed arginine violin toxicity, the drug of cholesterol. Now we are running this one. Yes, very good. So, based on the pharmacological actions, depending upon the selectivity and non-selectivity of drugs, the clinical uses of antimuscarinic drugs vary. Atropine, it can be given diarrhea, as you mentioned rightly. Acetylcholine esterase poisoning, which is organophosphate poisoning. NT is spasmodic. What is spasm? Muscle. Here we are talking about the smooth muscle, okay, not the skeletal muscle. So NT is for when there is a pain, abdominal pain, because of the intestinal response, it will be released. Anti-secretory agent prior to surgery. Why do we give anti-secretory agents prior to surgery when the patient is undergoing anesthesia, general anesthesia? Because during anesthesia, bronchial secretions or oral cavity secretions, if they are too many, the patient is unconscious. Unintentionally, he may inhale and we call pneumonia. Because we want to make him try. They are both secretions. So they are very. So these are only three anesthetic medications we learn in neuroscience. For dilating pupils before eye examination, when you would like to see the retina and other part of the eye, of course, the only window for you to examine those sites is through pupil. Okay? Through pupil has to be taken out to see everything clearly. So you will use atropine and other drugs. There are some other synthetic drugs which will dilate the pupil and you can see through the upper very clearly. Pyromethamine, it is for GIT, hyperacidity, peptic ulcer, obviously decreased gastric secretion. Any question? Dense caffeine is specifically for Parkinson's disease because it goes to female. Other indications, ipratropium, it is for, you missed one thing, it is very good, widely used for asthma because antimuscarinic drug cause bronchodilation. So asthma, scopolamine drug of choice, most widely used drug to prevent motion sickness. Okay. And these are the synthetic drugs for directing people before eye examination. The reason why these are used because atropine, the duration of action of atropine is days. We are not talking about hours or minutes. It is days, 3 to 4 days. So a person who requires dilation for a few minutes, 5, 10 minutes, if he continues to have dilated pupil, he can't see. So these are short-acting synthetic antimuscarinics for mid-reactive before eye examination, and eye. Adverse effect, dry mouth, understandable. Blurred vision because of the mid-reactive. Tachycardia, obviously. Constipation, understandable. Restlessness, confusion, delirium due to CNS effects. Retention of fluid, we discussed, because of the relaxation of the genital muscle, brachiosaurus muscle. Precipitation of glaucoma because of the raise in intraocular pressure. Increased body temperature because of the decreased sweating. Now this is not in the textbook, but I thought to share with you very interesting thing. When I was of your age, in third year, we used to study pharmacology in our third year in UPSC. So our teacher, and there was an standard textbook, toxicrome. Toxicrome is just like a set of manifestations of toxicity. So that was very interesting. Toxicrome of anti-muscarinic activity, just like inhibit. Heart as a hair. Hyperthermia. Okay. That we remember religiously. Blind as a bat. Okay. Dry as a bone. Okay. So this was a toxicrome. Red as a beet. Now this is interesting. We didn't discuss this later. But the issue is when there's the decreased sweating, why there's refreshing? Compensatory, because of the increase in body temperature, your cutaneous blood supply will compensatory dilate to get rid of some of the things, compensatory. So basically, atropine toxicity will lead to flushing, dilatation of the cutaneous blood. So red is a beet. And finally, made as a header. Delirium, confusion. So this header, do you know header?
Yeah.
Header. Who knows? Who said it? Yes. Yes, that's wonderful. But like that wonderland is a new thing. Like the wonderland is a new thing. The made in header was a phrase used in 17th century in UK. And it's also Shakespeare has also used them. So there was an industry in UK at the time, or London. They used to make very fancy hats, and though they used some material which was from mercury, okay, they processed mercury and beautified those hats, hat industry. So because of those still remain, those articles, they use mercury, they handle mercury. Over the period of years, slowly, they developed mercury toxicity. And they became mad. So mercury toxicity is very critical in the schizophrenia and psychological disorders. They became crazy. So that was used when the head of the person who made that. So that character has come in alive model. Yes.
Actually, it's not like people and you're not going to see after 3-4 days. Why do you keep asking an Excel direct description and you're not going to be able to see for like 3-4 days? Like all of this just becomes
From if you go outside, if you want to see your friend, take and see and measure the size of the people now in this classroom. And if I turn on my light now, and then you see the size of the people, the body, the nature has given you the flexibility of adjusting the size of the people according to the magnitude of light that you are exposed to. If it becomes fixed due to another increase of culture, that's what we do. No matter whatever the amount of light is there, it will not adjust. There will be parallel of the theory. That is not adjusting now. Then we mentioned cyclopedia. Cyclopedia is parallel of the theory. So it is not adjusting now in that case. If your health is not adjusting, theory is not adjusting, in spite of the people remain constant under the influence of the quantity.
Yeah, so why do you want to see? Why do you give it that?
Out there, now, during the attention that we do, he was talking in topic of mind, which are started. Okay. Now, contraindication means the situations where you must not use. And the Bhakran. Can you think of situations? Glaucoma, very good. Glaucoma. Drive out contraindication. You have to see the contraindication where the drug can become very troublesome or even life-threatening. Dementia. Yes, very good. Dementia. First of all, the most common is BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy. The most important and universal manifestation of BPH in the elderly male, not females. Okay. Is the retention of urine. Because if you remember the anatomy, prostate lies under the bladder. It increases in size, it stresses the bladder, and you will have retention of urine. Okay. So already the most important manifestation of that is retention of urine, and you are further relaxing it, causing retention. So BPH is basically contraindication, absolute contraindication for using intramuscular drug. Glaucoma, another absolute contraindication, and you mentioned dementia. Okay, these are the contraindications for using. All other related contraindications you can use this caution. Now we discussed antimuscarinic, the other is ganglion blocker. Preganglionic, sympathetic, and both sympathetic, pre-sympathetic, preganglionic nicotinic receptor is both sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia. Nicotine, mecamphetamine, and trimethophan. Is it a mistake? Can you see some problem with the previous lecture? So nicotine we discussed last time as an agonist. Today we are discussing as an antagonist. Mistake? No. Last time I discussed because a nicotine receptor has the property the pen agonist for prolonged period of time, and in high concentration will become an antagonist. Not as antagonist technically, but because it will cause failure of the nicotine receptor to depolarize that. Okay, that is it. We'll discuss this phenomenon later on in the context of neuromuscular blocker. So mecamphetamine, trimethophan, these drugs, They act as nicotinic receptors on both sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia to block entire ANS, useless, not used therapeutically, simply just to confuse you, to add few drugs in your pharmacology. These are here, otherwise they are not drugs in your at all. That's more important. Neuromuscular parameters. Nicotinic receptors. Now they are of two types. Competitive or non-depolarizing. And other non-competitive or depolarizing. Now the prototypes are tubocurine, pancuronium, and tracurium, and non-competitive or depolarizing we have one drug, phenylcholine. Now this table shows you the mechanism of it. Is there anyone, smart girl in the past, in the death benches, which can, from this figure, can describe the mechanism of action of tubocurine? From death benches, is there any girl? No? No smart girl? Or no? Okay. Beautiful. Can you figure out the definition?
Bind to the and cause no intrinsic.
Very good. So competitive or non-depolarizing is the drug. Very good. Thank you. Which is just like competitive antagonist of acetylcholine H nicotinic receptors on neuromuscular system. Okay. Now, can you figure out the definition on the upper left? Mechanism of action of depolarizing or non-competitive? Anybody? Yes, yes, say.
It's gonna bind irreversibly to the receptor. And I'm not sure, but depolarizing. Yeah, it's depolarizing. And
So basically, it is an evolution. It needs to be.
isn't that very fast?
No,
So it's an acid.
it is an evolution. It is an evolution, but then persistent binding will failure. You already, I think, last time we discussed, some of you already stated that receptor becomes sensitive. Didn't you study in your book class? Introduction? When did you study nerve and muscle transmission?
The what? The nerve.
Muscle.
Okay.
LSD, okay. So you must have studied that. We'll discuss further. Okay. So this is the way the neurotransmission at neuromuscular junction happens. This is the fiber supplying to the muscle fiber, and as the action potential arises, the fiber is stimulated and the nerve fiber is stimulated. There is a release of acetylcholine, which binds with the acetylcholine nicotinic receptors on the postsynaptic muscle fiber and causes depolarization. And there is a release of calcium from where?
Sarcoplasmic reticulum.
What is the name of the receptor which is activated?
Isn't circ? No, circ.
Sulca is the pump which brings back the calcium back into the sarcoplasmic. It is the receptor which is activated, which is sensitive to calcium. That is why we also call it calcium-induced calcium release. Have you heard those phenomena? Long time. You have to remember that your whole life. Calcium-induced calcium release, the receptor sensitive to the calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum is a ranolin receptor. Ranolin. Is this name familiar to you or you? Huh? So there is a release of calcium which causes more interaction between actin and myosin. There is a contraction. This is always excitation, contraction coupling. Because the cell is excited, that leads to contraction of the skeletal muscle. So this is the way. Now, what you do here basically, now you can see the people were very smart in thousands of years. When we talk about Orobrus, I will South America, not North America, Africa was explored later on by the Canadians and Portuguese and Dutch people. South America and the Caribbean islands. He saw, especially in the current Ecuador and Paraguay, the people were using some arrows. And the arrows, they were pointed towards the wild animals. And they watched, they observed that within few minutes, those wild animals, big animals, they fall on the ground. And they can't move. And some, if they were with the fire inside of so those animals died. For centuries, they couldn't figure out what that is. That was actually a poison obtained from a plant. They applied that poison on the tip of the arrows. And if the arrow hit the animal, within few minutes, the animal became paralyzed. And that contained later on, after doing the research was conducted, and we had the means to do characterization of body. They were found out that actually it contains a chemical tuberculine. Tuberculine.
The one, not the competitive one.
Completely. Okay. Which I mentioned.
Yeah.
Although now it is not a drug, but it is a prototype, because it was the first one which stimulated scientists to make synthetic compounds on the same line, having the same mechanism of action, which can compete with acetylcholine at the nicotinic receptor in the nervous junction and cause the relaxation of paralysis of the spirit muscle. So those were very smart people, South Americans. So competitive, at low dose, they compete tuberculine. It is not a drug nowadays. It is just for academic purposes, historically. It is important. Otherwise, we have even the most commonly used pancurine, which I mentioned in my previous slide. So at low doses, it competes with acetylcholine for the nicotinic receptor, and at high doses, which is not therapeutically achieved, it can block the sodium channels, causing more weakening of transmission. Direct binding with sodium channels without involving acetylcholine receptor. Okay. So the main action is competitive antagonism of acetylcholine nicotinic receptor. Are you with me?
So at high dose, it binds to
Sodium channel directly. Okay. So what would you do to overcome the effect of competitive neuromuscular blockade if it is high dose? Yes. How would you do that? Then injection with acetylcholine? That was the experience. Last time we discussed acetylcholine cannot be used as a drug because it can't, the biggest problem with the drug delivery, you can't dictate the drug to reach at the required site of action. Estrase. Only acetylcholine estrase inhibitor, right? So at low dose administration of acetylcholine estrase inhibitors like neostigmine, we discussed last time. And at a higher dose, you can't do anything, just dead. Comparative neuromuscular blockers, not comparative, competitive neuromuscular blockers, indications. Can you think of a situation where these drugs can be of use? Please, hello, can you check the internet? What are the clinical uses of competitive neuromuscular blockers and let me know? I have forgotten. You are already on the Google. Like paralyzed clinical. These are not important. These are not these are other things. Why would you want to paralyze skeletal muscle? Can you think of the situation? Surgery, support surgery. Actually, you would not like to paralyze, but make it completely relaxed. Because even you would feel your muscles. Even though they are relaxed, there is some degree of spasm already there, which is known as tone of the muscle. Okay? All the skeletal muscles are in partially contracted state. That is known as tone of the muscle. It offers resistance. It offers resistance. When you are undergoing surgery, then resistance offered by muscle, if it has a tone, will create a problem for the surgeon to incise or the abdominal muscles. If it is relaxed completely with the help of it will be just like a piece of cake. Just like a particular cake. Very relaxed, soft muscles. So as an adjuvant in anesthesia during surgery, to facilitate intubation for the same purpose, to relax the muscles. These are the indications of neuromuscular blockers. And then we have one drug which is non-competitive, which does not compete with acetylcholine, rather it binds and is an agonist. So there is some difference in the pharmacological action. Phase 1, acetylcholine binds to nicotinic receptor, opens the sodium channel and causes membrane depolarization, which results in transient fasciculation. So this first sentence is exactly the description of acetylcholine. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So initially, it will cause fasciculation. Do you remember fasciculation? Twitching. So it will be causing powerful contractile injury. Initially, because acetylcholine like it, it's an agonist. It's nicotinic receptor. It causes twitching, fasciculation. But since the other thing is phase 2, it will completely related. Select therapy will follow in a few minutes because acetylcholine is resistant to acetylcholine estrase and will cause prolonged depolarization of the end plate membrane. It will fail to repolarize. It will fail to repolarize because of the persistent binding of acetylcholine on the receptor. Later on, in phase 2, eventually the membrane will be at least partially repolarized. However, the receptor is now desensitized to acetylcholine, thus preventing the formation of future further action potential. I think you already discussed this and you know what you told me last time. So this is phase 2, becomes insensitive to desensitized to action of acetylcholine. So this is the way it works.
Doctor,
Yes,
could it be used for patients with seizures?
acetylcholine.
No, the one that inhibits the one that inhibits that we use.
Not acetylcholine, but you may use other substances.
That way, does that work in the same way?
Yes, now you are dragging me to some.
No.
Don't be the time I can take into it. In neuroscience block, you learn a algorithm how to manage a patient with the state of epilepticus. The state of epilepticus is the condition when there is the continuous seizure. And initially, there is a different management of seizures. Ketimol or Granmol, there are anti-epileptic drugs. Apart from that, when there is a state of epilepticus, when the patient is having ongoing seizure, then initially there are benzodiazepines, which you are not aware of, what are those? Okay. And then the next management is bupropion like drugs, neuromuscular blocker, where you completely relate further. Finally, if it is not controlled, you can even undergo general anesthesia. Okay. The algorithm of management, how to manage a patient with this state of epilepsy. So, responding to your question, can these drugs be used in epilepsy? Yes. In severe cases, then it cannot be controlled by conventional anti-epileptic drugs. Okay. But not acetylcholine. Why? It initially causes fasciculation. It will work. So that is why I mentioned this last Friday, the difference between these two subclasses. Medication, because of rapid onset and short duration of action, acetylcholine is used in endotracheal intubation And these are the different things. Non-depolarizing like levochlorine, effects of muscle specification of right away progression. On the right side, depolarizing succinylcholine, there will be initially specification. That means, in other words, it will worsen the fit. Isn't it? And in non-depolarizing block, you will end up like by anti-choline estrase inhibitors like geostigmine I mentioned in my previous, but in succinylcholine, no. Why? It will work then. Because the block has already been caused because of the excessive stimulation of nicotine receptor. And by increasing the concentration of acetylcholine by giving acetylcholine estrase inhibitors, you will contain the block. So you will not get acetylcholine estrase inhibitor with succinylcholine. Any question? I think this is the last slide. No, still. Generally, I avoid hormone candidates, so there must be something important here. All of the neuromuscular blocking drugs are highly polar compounds and hence inactive when administered orally. They must be administered parenterally. Polar means charged. They are highly charged. These drugs are highly ionized, do not readily cross cell membranes, and are not found in chemical tissues. Okay. That is why I put it here. How will this impact their volume of the sheet? Only from the big ranges. Did you search in Google? The clinical uses of neuromuscular blocker? Yes.
Basically, the body takes unionizable substances because ionized they tend to attract water molecules, so it becomes bigger, complex-like, therefore it's not absorbed. So since it's ionized, it won't be having a high volume of accumulation.
Very good. Thank you. So the drug will remain in the vesicular compartment. So that will remain in the vesicular compartment, and the volume of distribution will be roughly more or less equal to the drop volume, around 5 liters. Succinylcholine is extremely short and induces rapid hydrolysis by butyrylcholine estrase and pseudocholine estrase in the liver and plasma. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Okay, let me know. Are there too many drugs in my lecture? Too many? Expect hormonal from you because what? Is it? Okay. Ready?
I can't guess all of the difference between neural function. Like one
Well, it is basically not in enough. Yeah. Look at the name, subclinal choline is very similar structurally to subclinal choline. The difference is mind state for subclinal choline. No, it is initially it is an agonist, but then because it continuously depolarizes, it becomes agonist. No, no, in the sense that it is not, in the sense it is not the same. Okay. Phenyl center, nicotinic acid. Because it is not competing with it directly binds. So I think the better terminology is simply considered as a depolarizing.
No, this is that's the muscle.
Yes, it is. But initially, because it's all
The
control.
same action, but what the difference is like?
Difference is here, it inhibits acetylcholine to bind with the choline. To bind with the receptor. So consider, forget about non-competitive, just consider this as a depolarizer. Depolarization means causing a depolarization. It is not like an abundance, but like acetylcholine does. That is why it causes initial contraction, we call it specific. Then